You're just in time to get a lesson from Timothy B. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com as we learn about how they kicked in the golden age of football. Tim's up in just a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another edition where we get to go back in time and talk about some great gridiron history with Timothy P. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thank you, Darren. Look forward to chatting, and hopefully your listeners will get a kick out of this particular podcast.
Yes, kick indeed. This is one, I don't think we've talked a whole lot about the kicking game in our 100 so conversations we've had over the last few years. But you have this one titled The Fundamentals of Kicking in 1923. So we're going back 102 years ago now that we're in 2025. So why don't you share with us the fundamentals of kicking?
Yeah, so I've kind of come across a lot of different kicking information in the past, but a lot of this comes, this particular tidbit came out of a little pamphlet that I acquired, a little booklet from the Wilson Athletic Library. And in 1923, they produced, they were competing with Spalding, and Spalding had a whole set of different books and pamphlets about everything under the sun in the sports world. And so Wilson was trying to compete with them, and they produced some similar, kinds of publications. So they had a series of, I want to say it's 6 different, say 30 to 40 page pamphlets on different aspects of football. And one of them is just called The Fundamentals of Football, and they cover the kicking inside of that. And so it's a period piece, so it's 1923. So the ball was still a pretty rotund, little spheroid. And so most field goal attempts, and even extra point attempts were drop kicks, rather than placement kicks. A lot of teams just they didn't have enough practice time. They didn't have real good snapping techniques. The better ones did. But anyways, there were still a lot of guys who drop kicked. And if you drop kicked, you could be in your punt formation, and people wouldn't know if you were going to be drop kicking, running, or passing the ball. So, they couldn't rush you quite as heavily as they might have.
And you have an extra blocker too, because you don't
Yes.
need the holder.
Yeah. So, and actually, the original quarterback sneak. I mean, we think of the quarterback sneak happening quarterback under center, but they didn't have quarterbacks under center back then. So the original quarterback sneak was a short hike to the quarterback, who was, just a couple of yards behind the line of scrimmage. But anyways, so this book kind of goes through, it's technique oriented. So it goes through, if you're a drop kicker, you got to line it up. You got to line it up, right? You got to get yourself at the right angle. You got to catch the ball. You got to take the proper number of steps. You kick with your toe. And one of the things that's kind of interesting that, you don't really think about it, but as a drop kicker, the long snappers back then were not as good as the long snappers of today, right? So you'd get that snap tossed back to you, but sometimes it wasn't anywhere near as accurate as you'd like. And if you're a punter, you just catch the thing and you punt it, and it goes, as long as it goes downfield, you're good, right? I mean, you may not get the coffin corner, but you're pretty much going to be okay. If you're drop kicking and you have a bad snap, then you got to reorient yourself. If you're picking up a low snap, you got to stand up. I mean, it's a much more complicated thing when you just kind of walk through the process of, I'm drop kicking and there's a bad snap. What do I do? Right? So, anyways, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting thing, the kind of thing we just don't think about much anymore. Um, but this booklet then goes through, the all of the right techniques for place kicking, which is pretty much the same thing, from a kicking standpoint as for drop kicking. Um, but one of the things I thought was really fun is that it talked about 4 ways of positioning the ball on kickoffs, right? So pretty much we think of putting the ball on the tee and it's kind of slanted back toward the kicker, right? So they saw that slanted back as one of the options. They also offered the straight up version. Um, you could also slant it forward, which you'll see in rugby, oftentimes. So the ball slanted forward, and you actually kick it, you
Hmm.
kick the bottom side of the ball. And another one is parallel to the ground. So now I'm going to do the big reveal. This guy behind me, you can see, back then
Hmm.
they didn't have tees other than if you were going to tee up the ball, you scooped up dirt and you made a little mound. And so this little thing here, that is a mound of dirt. And then he's just laying the ball on top, on top of it flat. And then when he kicks it, he's going to kick the underside of the ball and it's going to go all, move crazily. But so it's one of those things that um, you know, just the fact that they didn't have tees is
Hmm.
kind of crazy in and of itself, right? Um, and but they, the fields were bad enough that everyone could find dirt. There was going to be dirt and sod, chunks of sod available for you to build a little mound. And some schools, they had like buckets of dirt on the sidelines. So the kicker would go over, scoop up a handful, and then run back out to the field and build his little mound. So, I mean, that was just like a normal part of the game that we don't think about anymore. Um, the other thing that was in this same section, I didn't bring a drawing along, but kick returns, right? And, you know, it's always been available to, once the ball on kickoffs had to go 10 yards, and they put that rule in to basically stop the flying wedge, so back in 1892, 94, something there. Um, so um, once it had to go 10 yards, most teams still would only have one or two, the receiving team would only have one or two guys within 10 to 15 yards of the ball, right? I mean, now we all know you have to have five, right? But that rule didn't come in until 1932 because they were trying to reduce kicking teams' ability to form wedges, as
Hmm.
they return the ball. Um, and so that's why that rule even exists. But that just it wasn't the case at the time, and yet hardly anybody kicked onside kicks. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, it should have been so obvious that you had a good chance of recovering the ball, but hardly anybody did it. So um, I'm not really sure why. I mean, it might have been one of those sportsmanship kind of things, but I mean, it did happen from time to time, but not very much. So, anyways,
Hmm. Yeah,
dirt tees, and only two guys, within 20, 30 yards of the ball, actually, oftentimes just crazy.
yeah. I wonder if that picture behind you with the ball in a mound of dirt was the inspiration for the Lombardi Trophy. You tilt that ball a little bit more, and you can
Yeah.
almost see it in chrome. So
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Pretty creative of you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have just some great ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, but I'm wondering about the rules. Something that you said with the drop kick and how to handle a bad snap. And I'm wondering if they had to have a rule in there that the kicker had to handle it by hand. Because let's say you had a bad snap and it's rolling and it's almost like a kickball game. That would probably be an illegal kick, I'm assuming. They probably would have done something to prevent that.
Yeah. So the rules did say exactly, and really, if you go back to 1876, I'm almost certain it differentiates punt from a kick. But you had to drop, the kicker had to drop the ball and strike it with their foot as it rebounded from the ground, you know. So
So they
that was
defined the
a
process,
requirement.
the whole part of the process to do that. Okay.
Yeah. And
All
it's
right.
also, you know, in that, you know, at the same time, they had rules that said a punt does not count as a field goal, right? Only a drop kick, and then later, you know, placement kicks, you know, counted. But it's kind of a funny thing. I'm working on a tidbit because I came across something, uh, somebody published a page or two of the 1929 Canadian rugby union rules. So that was the first year that Canada had forward passing. And I think they just had it in Alberta, but anyways, the uh, there's some interesting things in that rule book about the kicking process because they were still more of a rugby game, but they had, and I'm blanking, I think it might have been a running kick, but they had a name for kicking the ball that just as it was bounding along the ground, right? So in, you know, the more rugby oriented you were, the longer that stayed as part of the game. So it was still in the Canadian football / rugby in the 1930s. So anyways, you know, I'll put together something about that in the not too distant future, or recent past, depending on when we air this.
It's like vintage wine. You've got to let it, sit
Yeah,
for a little bit
yeah.
and rise to the top and all that stuff. So yeah, well, that's something to look forward to. So that'll be another great piece. And you have some spontaneous, to at least to us, your readers. You're giving us some advance warning on this one, but you have some things that we would, as readers and football historians and fans of football history, would never even imagine thinking about, or even I guess considering being a story. But they're so interesting because they're such an integral part of the game and how the game developed into the modern game that we love and that people loved back then. And you do them in your tidbits and you share them with the world. Maybe you could share with our audience how they can partake in reading some of these.
Yeah, just go to footballarchaeology.com. It's a Substack site, so you can, just read whatever's available, on the front page and then on the archives, depending on your subscription. But if you subscribe, all you got to do is put in your email. You'll get an email every time I publish a new story. And if you're, about probably a third of the stories are free, and then the other 2/3 go to paid subscribers. You, as a free subscriber, you still see it. You just can't read the whole story. So, but that's it. Other than that, follow me on Blue Sky or just go to the site whenever you have a hankering for some football tidbits.
Tim, this was some awesome information and awesome stories and history once again, and we really appreciate you doing this and preserving football history and then coming and sharing with us each Tuesday. And we'd love to talk to you again next week.
Very good. Look forward to it. Thanks.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.